We've been taught that strength means grit. It means pushing through. It means showing up without flinching, without breaking, without feeling too much. We glorify the hard edges, stoicism, sarcasm, detachment. We say, don't let them see you cry. Don't take it personally. Don't let it get to you. And we call that resilience. But what if we've misunderstood what strength really is? What if true resilience isn't found in how well you armor up, but how gently you can still love without it? What if the strongest thing you could do wasn't to walk away first, but to stay present with your heart still open, even when it hurts? What if keeping the door unlocked after it's already been slammed, kicked in, or quietly walked through was the real miracle? Because anyone can become tough, hard. That's easy. You just stop trusting. You stop showing up fully. You tighten your chest and sharpen your tongue and call it wisdom. You stop asking questions you don't want the answers to. You stop offering your hand before they ask. And eventually, you stop feeling it at all. But softness, chosen, not inherited, is a different kind of power. The kind that comes after the world has given you every reason to shut down, and you still choose not to. That's not naivety. That isn't weakness. That is courage. And maybe the bravest thing we can do in a culture that rewards coldness is to keep feeling anyway, to choose gentleness over guardedness, to risk being moved, to love knowing it might not be returned, to stay soft, not because the world deserves it, but because you do. Because your softness is not a liability. It is not a crack in your armor or a flaw in your design. It is the part of you that remains alive, still responsive, still tender, still human in a world that keeps asking you to numb out. Softness isn't passivity. It isn't rolling over or avoiding confrontation. It's being willing to show up as you are, raw, feeling, unedited. It's letting the world touch you without letting it define you. It's feeling pain without becoming it. And more than anything, it's having the strength to keep loving, even when you know what it feels like to be let down, dismissed, or left. That's not foolish. That's revolutionary. Because every time you choose to stay soft, you are doing something most people are afraid to do. You are trusting that your heart is worth protecting without hiding it. You are choosing to feel when so many have already chosen to forget. So no, this isn't a plea for blind optimism. This isn't about denying the hurt or pretending the world hasn't hardened you. This is about walking forward anyway, not untouched, but uncompromised. This is about remembering that the deepest strength is not the one that closes the door, but the one that keeps opening it, even after, even still, even now. We aren't born hardened by the world. We become that way, slowly, quietly, and often for good reason. Somewhere along the way, softness stopped feeling safe, Maybe it was the betrayal that came after vulnerability, the love that turned cold without explanation, the moment you opened your heart and someone mistook it for permission to walk through it carelessly. So we build armor, not out of malice, but survival. We learn how to not need, how to not ask, how to not show too much. We speak in sarcasm instead of sincerity. We laugh things off that actually hurt. We start saying it is what it is instead of this isn't okay. And the world praises us for it. You're so mature now, so composed, so unbothered. But deep down, we know that's not strength. It's restraint. It's fear in a sharper outfit. It's loneliness dressed up as independence. We stop crying. We stop reaching out. We stop believing that anyone can meet us where we actually are. And we call that growth. But what if it's not? What if it's just a quieter kind of grief? The kind that doesn't scream, but hardens. The kind that doesn't seek revenge, but erases softness as a preemptive form of protection. Because we confuse stillness for healing, we confuse silence for peace, we confuse the absence of pain for wholeness. But numb isn't healed, and disconnected isn't free. At some point we have to ask, is the armor still protecting me, or is it just keeping everything out, including the good? Because walls don't filter, they block. And the same wall that keeps the hurt away also keeps love from getting in. So we walk around half alive, untouched, yes, but that also means you're untouched by joy, unmoved, unbothered, but also uninspired, unlit, unheld. That's not strength, that's survival, and it's served its purpose. But eventually you have to decide, do I want to survive or do I want to live? That's where softness begins again, not as default, but as decision, not as exposure, but as reclamation. Because you were never weak for feeling deeply. You were just told it wasn't safe. Now it's time to decide for yourself. Because the world will never ask you to be soft. It will ask you to perform, to compete, to keep your voice even when you want to cry, to keep your face still while your heart is breaking. It will reward your detachment, your silence, your polished answers. It will tell you that you are doing well. But often what it means is you are no longer inconvenient. You are no longer vulnerable enough to require care. You've become efficient, digestible, predictable, safe for others. That's the quiet lie of the armor. It doesn't just protect you. It protects them from having to hold your truth. And so we learn to suppress. We shrink our emotional vocabulary down to fine, tired, and busy. We stop admitting when we're disappointed. We stop reaching out when we're hurting. We become fluid and withholding. And it works for a while. You get less hurt, fewer misunderstandings, less risk, but you also get fewer moments of real connection, fewer moments of awe, fewer moments that remind you you're alive. Because connection doesn't happen in performance, it happens in presence. And presence requires that you feel, not perform your feelings, not translate them into something easier to digest. Just feel. But when you're armored, you feel through a filter. You don't cry. You tear up and swallow it. You don't laugh. You smirk. You don't love. You flirt around it. And eventually, you forget what it felt like to be unarmored, to say what you mean, to ask for what you need, to soften without fear. The forgetting is the real danger, because the longer you wear the armor, the more it feels like skin, and the more you mistake numbness for strength. But numbness doesn't protect you. It just delays the reckoning. The grief still waits. The ache still lives beneath the surface, and no amount of pretending can keep it buried forever. So maybe strength isn't what we've been told. Maybe it's not in the stone face or the cold shoulder. Maybe it's not in walking away before you're hurt. Maybe strength is what begins the moment you admit, I'm tired of carrying this armor. It's heavy, it's lonely, and it's not who I really am. That's where softness returns, not as weakness, but as relief. Softness after pain is not instinct, it's a choice. And it's one of the hardest choices a person can make. Because to stay open after the storm, after the betrayal, after the slow ghosting or the sudden ending, after the world didn't hold you the way you needed, to remain soft in that space is not fragility. It is a quiet, deliberate kind of strength that few recognize, and even fewer know how to carry. Anyone can close. Anyone can harden. That's easy. That's gravity. What takes real courage is to remain affected, to still let yourself be moved, to still offer a kind word when your voice has trembled with silence for months, to still care, to still believe, not blindly, not without wisdom, but with it, knowing what it costs to feel deeply and still choosing to feel. Because that's what softness is. It's not naivety. It's the willingness to walk barefoot through the places where you were once cut, not to prove anything to anyone, but to prove to yourself that you are no longer ruled by fear. To forgive, to trust again, to say I'm here even when you don't know how you'll be received. These are acts of radical defiance in a culture that teaches us to shield, scroll, and numb. Softness is presence, not polished, not perfect, present. It says, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to meet you. That's why it scares people. Because when you're soft, you hold a mirror. You show others what it looks like to be honest. And some people would rather see nothing at all than see themselves clearly. But keep holding that mirror anyway. Keep being the one who asks how someone really is, who says I love you first, who hugs with your whole body, who doesn't weaponize detachment as wisdom. Not because the world is always safe for that kind of openness, but because you are safe within yourself. You've earned your softness, not because you haven't suffered, but because you have, and still choose love over armor, still choose presence over protection, still choose to feel when feeling is the harder path. That is strength, that is courage, and it doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stay open. Because staying open isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself or demand applause. It shows up in the smallest, quietest ways. In how you keep listening when you're tired. In how you ask someone to stay, even when you're scared they might leave. In how you speak softly when anger would be easier. It shows up in how you let someone see you without your mask, without your cleverness, without your control. And not everyone will meet you there. Some people will see your openness as an invitation to take. Some will mistake your gentleness for weakness. Some will leave anyway, not because you were too soft, but because they weren't ready to meet you without their own armor on. That doesn't mean you were wrong to open. It means you were brave enough to be real in a world that still confuses distance with safety. And no matter how they respond, your softness is yours. It isn't a reaction, it's a choice. It's your integrity. You don't stay soft because people deserve it. You stay soft because you do. Because that's how you stay in a relationship with your own heart. That's how you keep from becoming the very thing that hurts you. It's easy to go numb, to stop caring, to retreat so far inside yourself that no one can reach you. And sometimes, yes, that retreat is necessary. Sometimes the world really does hurt too much to stay exposed. But the point isn't to stay soft all the time. The point is to return to softness when you can. To come back to the warmth in your own chest. To remember that strength isn't built by never feeling, but by learning how to feel and still remain whole. You can carry grief and grace at the same time. You can hold boundaries without building walls. You can stay open without staying naive. That's what softness becomes when it survives the fire. Not a weakness, not a risk, a form of wisdom, lived, earned, embodied. And that wisdom, it doesn't just heal you, it heals everyone who comes near it. And yet, despite everything, despite how easy it would have been to shut down, to let grief calcify him around my heart like armor. I didn't. When I was 22, I lost my mom. Suddenly. Unexpectedly. There was no time to prepare. No warning. One day she was here. The closest person I had in this world. And the next, I was holding her hand as she took her last breath. And nothing prepares you for that. No book, no prayer, no conversation. It splits you. It makes the world quieter in all the wrong ways. Like the gravity changes and no one else notices. She wasn't just my mother. She was my anchor, my witness, my first home. And when I lost her, I lost that home. That part of me that was tethered. That part that felt held no matter what. And the truth is, no one would have blamed me if I crumbled. If I had turned cold. If I'd let bitterness take root and build a fortress around the ache. If I stopped trusting, stopped loving, stopped caring. But that's not what happened. Instead, it shaped me soft. It broke me open in a way that let more love in. Because when you see someone take their last breath, especially someone who loved you completely, you stop taking anything for granted. Time, words, presence. And I realized that legacy isn't about what you build or what you win. It's about how you treat people in the in-between. It's how you speak to them when they're hurting. It's how you make them feel seen in a passing moment. It's the softness you offer when the world has given them every reason to harden. That's what she left me with. Not a blueprint, not a roadmap, but a way of being. One that says, choose kindness when it costs you. Choose presence when it aches. Love people now, because later isn't promised. And I carry that every day. Not because it's easy, but because it's honest. Because it's the only thing I can offer that feels like her. And in the end, you realize something else too. That no matter who comes and who goes, no matter what you lose or how much you ache, there is only one person who is with you from your first breath to your last. You. Through every loss, every mistake, every sunrise, every collapse, it's you, holding your own hand in the dark. You, choosing how to move through the world. You, deciding whether to stay soft again. So I do. For her. For me. For everyone who no longer gets the chance. Because this soft, full-hearted living is the only kind of strength that means anything to me now. This kind of softness, the kind that lives after the storm, is not a leftover. It's not what's left behind when the fire passes. It's what's forged in the fire. It's easy to be kind when nothing has tested you. Easy to be open when you've never been left, or broken, or betrayed. But when you've known loss, when you've watched your world collapse in real time, when you've held your mother's hand as she left this earth, and still choose to show up with tenderness, that is not weakness. That is rebirth. You learn to carry your grief differently, not as a wound you flinch from, but as a reminder of what matters. You stop wasting time on performance. You stop needing to prove you're untouchable, because you have been touched by loss, by love, by life itself, and it's what made you real. You begin to understand that the way you speak to someone in a single moment might be the last thing they ever hear. And you act accordingly. You listen longer. You hug deeper. You say I love you without waiting for the perfect moment. You remember that presence is the greatest gift you can give. Softness stops being a risk. It becomes a responsibility. A quiet rebellion against the numbness we're all taught to carry. And no, it doesn't mean you're always open. It doesn't mean you don't have boundaries, or that you let everyone in. It means you don't let the world steal your humanity. You don't let bitterness become your personality. You don't mistake coldness for control. You lead with your heart, not because it's easy, but because it's true. Because you've lived through what you thought you couldn't, and instead of hardening, you softened. You learned that even grief can make space for beauty, that love, even after loss, is still worth giving, and that there is no strength more powerful than choosing to remain gentle when you've had every excuse not to. So yes, stay soft. Not because it's what the world deserves, but because you do. Because your softness is sacred. Because your story has sharpened you in all the right places and left your heart intact. And every time you choose compassion over coldness, truth over performance, presence over defense, you light the way for someone else to do the same. You remind them that softness isn't what you lose through suffering. It's what survives it. That is the quiet flame, the one no storm can put out. Of course, you don't come out of the storm the same. Grief changes your architecture. It rearranges the furniture of your inner world. What used to be at the center no longer holds. Things that once seemed urgent fall quiet. Things you once postponed, saying someday, suddenly become sacred. You learn that silence isn't always emptiness. That a simple, I'm here, can mean more than 1,000 perfect words. That softening isn't collapsing. It's choosing not to let the pain that entered your life become the language you speak. You begin to understand that strength has never been about how loudly you survive, but how gently you emerge. There's a certain kind of gentleness that comes only after heartbreak, after holding loss so closely that you no longer fear it. It doesn't make you invincible. It just makes you real. It roots you. It slows you down. It gives you the patience to sit with others in their dark. Not because you have answers, but because you know what it's like to sit there alone. That's what softness becomes after the storm. Not naivety, not denial, but deep, lived empathy. That kind that looks at someone in the eyes and says, "You don't have to perform here. You're safe to just be." And that matters more than we realize. Because when you stay soft, you become a place, a refuge, a reminder that even after the fire, even after the loss, there is a way back to yourself. There is a version of strength that doesn't need to prove anything. It just radiates. You may still have scars. You may still wake up with a weight in your chest some mornings. But you also carry a deeper knowing that softness is a decision you get to keep making. Not just for others, but for yourself. To live with tenderness. To love without guarantees. To lead without domination. To show up, open, even when your instinct says to shut it all down. Because you've seen what happens when time runs out. And you know now, kindness delayed is kindness lost. Presence postponed is presence gone. So you choose to soften again and again. Not because it's painless, but because it's true. Because it's the kind of strength you want to leave behind when you're gone. Somewhere along the way, we started confusing leadership with control. We started believing that to lead meant to dominate, to be the loudest voice in the room, to stay composed at all costs, never shaken, never moved. But the people we remember, the ones who changed us, didn't change us with force. They changed us with presence, with warmth, with a look that said, "I see you," and a tone that said, "You matter." The best leaders aren't the ones who command attention. They're the ones who earn trust, not through fear, but through consistency, honesty, and quiet strength. You don't have to be cold to be clear. You don't have to be loud to be firm. You can lead with your heart and still hold a boundary. You can be soft and still be sovereign. Because leading with softness doesn't mean you're passive. It means you know the difference between reaction and response. It means you pause long enough to ask, is what I'm about to say rooted in love or in my need to feel safe? That kind of leadership, the kind that starts from the inside, is what creates real change. not just in systems, but in people, in relationships, in communities. It starts by unlearning the lie that care and credibility are at odds, that kindness makes you easy to dismiss, that softness is something you outgrow on your way to power. What if softness is power? What if it's the kind of power that doesn't need to be defended because it's not trying to dominate, only to understand? You can be grounded and gentle. You can speak truth and still hold compassion. You can hold the line without raising your voice. This is not about being liked. It's about being real, being trusted, being felt. Because leadership isn't about getting people to follow you. It's about giving people permission to show up as themselves, to feel safe enough to speak, to soften, to be. The only way they'll believe that's possible is if they see you do it first. So go first. Lead with your heart. Risk being misunderstood. Risk being seen. Risk being soft. Not because it guarantees an outcome, but because it aligns with who you are when no one's watching. That's the kind of leader who lights the way, not with fire, but with warmth, not through pressure, but through presence, because presence leaves an imprint, not the kind you shout about, not the kind that earns applause, but the kind someone remembers years later, and how they breathe deeper when they're near you, and how they don't flinch when they speak their truth, and how they realize they didn't have to be so hardened all the time. That's what softness makes possible. It gives people space to be, to unfold, to speak messily, to heal. And that healing starts with you, with how you sit with yourself on the hard days, with how you forgive your past selves, with how you tend to your inner storms without shame, with how you hold your boundaries not as walls, but as invitations to meet you with care. Because softness isn't the opposite of strength. It's what makes strength real. Otherwise, it's just performance. Otherwise, it's just armor over emptiness. But when strength and softness meet, when love and discernment walk hand in hand, something powerful happens. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop bending your truth to stay likable. You stop apologizing for having a heart that feels, even in a world that begs you to shut it down. And that is the most radical thing you can do. To feel deeply, to speak gently, to stand firmly, to love openly, to stay soft, especially when the world gives you every reason not to. Because this kind of living isn't about being unhurt. It's about being whole. And wholeness doesn't require you to erase the ache. It just asks you to let it soften you instead of silence you. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to stay open. To keep letting in light where it hurts. To keep showing up in your own skin. To keep becoming the kind of presence you needed when you were learning how to feel again. To to show up today because you've seen that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. That's the legacy softness leaves. Not one of conquest, but of connection. Not of domination, but of depth. Of meeting people where they are, because you've done the work to meet yourself. Softness isn't what breaks when life gets heavy. It's what survives. It's what rises again after every collapse. A little quieter, a little steadier, but still burning. Maybe that's the point. Not to be unshakable, not to be untouchable, but to feel everything and still choose love. Because staying soft isn't about being safe. It's about being free. Free to feel. Free to care. Free to show up as yourself. Not the hardened version you thought you had to become to make it through. You are not behind. You are not weak. You are not foolish for loving deeply, for hoping again, for opening your heart even when it trembles. That is strength. That is power. That is you. So once again, stay soft, not for the world, for you. Because this life is too short to be spent pretending you don't feel it. And every time you choose tenderness, every time you soften when you can harden, every time you let someone in when fear says don't, you become a quiet flame in someone's dark. You show them it's possible to live with your heart intact. That's the strength we need more of. That's the kind of legacy worth leaving. Not one made of noise, but one made of warmth and presence and light. Because long after they forget your titles, your deadlines, your perfectly delivered plans, they will remember how you made them feel. They'll remember if you paused to look them in the eye, if you smiled with more than just with your mouth, if you asked how they really were and meant it. That is the imprint of softness. It lingers. It doesn't shout to be heard. It doesn't need to win to matter. It changes people from the inside out because it reminds them that gentleness is still alive in the world and that maybe, just maybe, they don't have to be so hard to survive. You can't control much in this life. You'll lose things you thought were forever. You'll grieve people you loved with everything you had. You'll stand in moments that feel like they might break you open for good. But if you can still be kind, if you can still choose presence over performance, tenderness over armor, and truth over ego, you've already won something more important than certainty. You've reclaimed your heart. You've proven to yourself that softness is not a weakness to be fixed, but a strength to be guarded and a light to be shared. So don't let the world take that from you. Not today. Not ever. Stay soft. Stay rooted. Stay real. And when in doubt, return to your own breath. Because you are your first home, your first witness, your only constant. And the way you treat yourself, the softness you offer you, that's where it all begins. That's where it all returns. If this reached you, if it reminded you of something true, I'm glad you're here. This one's for the ones who still feel everything deeply, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's hard to explain. If it helped, share it. If it softened something in you, let it stay soft. And if you're walking through your own storm right now, remember, you don't have to come out the other side harder. You can come out more honest, more open, more you. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you want more of this kind of space. I'm always trying something different. This time, something quieter, but no less powerful. And until next time, breathe deep, speak gently, and most of all, stay present.